As I've mentioned before, one of the darling children of the Thieaudio lineup can be regarded as the Hype 4, sandwiched between the Hype 10 as well as the Hype 2. And while the Hype 4 still gets most of the attention, there are still some people questioning, is the Hype 2 the Hype 4 but cheaper? Is it a budget-friendly version of the lauded middle child? And of course, since we are talking about it, yes, it is critical approved. I like it, but the big question is, why is it good? So let's talk about it. The Hype 2 is the cheapest of the Hype series, but even then still comes in at a cool $299 US. And there's a naming scheme with the Hype series, the number denoting the number of BAs that they have on top of their isobaric woofer. So with the Hype 2, it comes with, some would say, a measly 2 BA setup on top of its isobaric configuration. Before we get into it any further, let's talk about the non-audio stuff, starting with what you actually get with the package. On top of the IEM and the cable, what you get is a set of silicone tips, a set of foam tips, and a case. That's it. Not much to say here, though. I have to comment on the cable situation. It only comes with a 3.5mm SKU. So not only do you not get a removable termination, you're also stuck with a 3.5mm cable. There is no 4.4 option. So in terms of the build, it is a full resin shell, but it's also not 3D printed, so it's not filled resin. Thieaudio are still using traditional handmade methods with soft tilbing, and that's the same for the Hype 2. But the inclusion of a metal nozzle is nice and it feels fairly okay. I just wouldn't trust it with a proper fall from height. But that's just the non-audio stuff. This is part of the Hype series, the Hype 4's little brother. It must sound good, and yeah, it is a very well executed tuning. You can kind of see the similarities between the Hype 2 as well as the Hype 4. The Hype 4 is kind of unapologetically meta-ish, a V-shaped meta if you will, and it's kind of the same situation with the Hype 2, albeit in a slightly different flavor. The Hype 2 sort of follows an untilted diffused field response, but if you can imagine it, they also kill the ear gain region of about 3000 Hz. The bass as well as the upper treble is boosted significantly, so it's kind of a U-shaped response where it's more on the sub bass as well as on the upper air frequencies. And of course, couple that with the dip in the ear gain region, and what you get is just classic V-shape. Yes, the bass and treble are emphasized and it is done very nicely. The Hype 2's isobaric DDs provide the slam, thump, rumble similar to that of the Hype 4, but it also has that upper treble sparkle that just balances everything out. This is an IEM that you would like if you're someone who appreciates both ends of the spectrum, the deep sub bass as well as the upper air frequencies. And it does so tastefully without sounding too unnatural. The mid-range, yes, still falls in line with somewhat of a diffused field response. And while things can sound energetic owing to, yes, its two emphases, it still sounds correct. But my one criticism of the Hype 2 would be on its treble timbre. As you move up into the upper frequencies, things sound, yes, emphasized, but not the most natural treble that I've heard. If you're someone who wants a more natural treble timbre, I would suggest to go for the Hype 4, which is more natural, but at the same time also more emphasized. I think the Hype 2 is a great alternative if you're someone who likes the general direction of the Hype 4, but prefer something maybe a bit brighter instead. For those of you who want a more meta tuning with warmer mids or at least less thin mids, then probably consider the Hype 4 instead. Now let's talk about the shoulds and the shouldn'ts. Why you should consider buying the Hype 4 and why you shouldn't. Let's start with the bad points, and most obvious of which would be on the whole cable situation. Yes, you're only limited to a 3.5mm SKU, and quite honestly, at a price point of 300 US, this is a bit unacceptable. The Hype 2 is also traditionally made, so for those of you who want a more durable resin shell, you might want to consider a 3D printed alternative instead. And sound-wise, in terms of the sound signature, if you're someone who can't take that V-shaped response or even a U-shaped response, then look elsewhere. And for why you should get the Hype 2, well, it's still one of the better executed U-shaped responses that I've heard in an IEM. The bass is cleaner than the Hype 4, for example, and the treble, while a bit unnatural, balances out very well with that sub-bass response. And it does so without completely compromising on the mid-range. Yes, you get a bit less ear gain, but for some people, that might be a plus as well. And on a lesser note, the Hype 2 is also the cheapest IEM that can test out the Hype series' isobaric DDs. All of them use the same woofer. But hey, you don't have to take my word for it. You can always try it out for yourself at the Hangout. We're located at 200 South Bridge Road in Chinatown. Come on down, grab a cup of coffee or even a cup of ice cream, and then ask for the Hype 2. Try it out for yourself and then form your own opinions. And for those of you who are not lucky enough to be in Singapore, well, you can always come down to Hangout.audio, our online retail store. We ship globally and for free for orders over $30. This is Chronicle for Hangout.audio, and remember kids, if it's not on the list, it doesn't exist. See you next week.